Yeah, I think they should. That's the real answer. The markets believe they will. Most of the major banks believe they will. And regardless of whether it happens today, the reality is that there are more and more interest rate rises coming between now and the end of the year. So this decision only about 15 seconds away now. But the background of this is, of course, inflation. And central banks have one way of dealing with inflation, and that's raising interest rates. Inflation is now broken out in Australia. And so as a result, you'd imagine that the response, as it has been elsewhere around the world, is for rates to rise. So that decision is coming pretty much right now. And in fact, as we sit here and speak, we'll just update a few numbers and just see what's going on. It seems as though, as I sit here quietly and wait for my computer to kick itself back into gear, we'll actually see this number. And the number is that they have jumped by 0.25. So they've gone more than what the market anticipated. They've raised rates by 0.25%. They've gone from 0.1% to 0.35%. In other words, the Reserve Bank here and its board has made a statement, a significant statement about trying to quell the rising inflation, to get on top of this and indeed to respond to the breakout in underlying inflation. That's its key metric, and it now certainly has responded in a significant style, Kieran.
So going higher than the market had expected, and often with rate decreases or increases, it's to jolt sentiment, isn't it? It's to jolt sentiment among consumers and so on. That's the whole point. By doing this, is it enough of a move? Will it placate most economists?
The answer is it won't, because there's more rate rises coming. So let's go to what the board now says in the statement from Philip Lowe that's just been released. The board is committed to doing what's necessary to ensure that inflation in Australia returns to target over time. This will require a further lift in interest rates over the period ahead. So get that? He's just said this will require further increases in interest rates in the period ahead. The board will continue to monitor the incoming information and evolving balances of risk as it determines as the timing. But what basically he's saying here is effectively that inflation has picked up significantly by more than expected, though it remains lower than other advanced economies. But the rise in inflation was largely reflecting global factors, but domestic capacity constraints are increasing. So the point here also is it's such a significant increase in interest rates, such a big statement by an independent Reserve Bank board during an election campaign. So this certainly, along with that big inflation number last week, is not what the Morrison government, certainly not what Scott Morrison himself would have been anticipating at the beginning of this election campaign. But just to repeat, interest rates have been raised by 0.25% today by the Reserve Bank, taking the rate from 0.1%, the emergency low, to now 0.35%. And you can imagine, Kieran, that the banks will be very quickly following on with big increases in variable rate home loans.